Hello, everyone who is joining us today to watch this recording. Thank you for making time. As always, we will try to keep our Star Paths webinar to a good 30 to 40 minutes, nice and bite-sized for you. And I am Amber Gilsdorf with Estrela Consulting, and I am here today with a special guest, and I'm going to have her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Mariah Coons with Attunement Counseling and Assessment, and I am an independent school psychologist.
So, fun fact for those of you tuning in, I actually know Mariah through our shared crossover time where we worked together in a high school. So, my former life, I was a high school counselor, and Mariah was a high school psychologist. So, we actually were neighbors. Our offices were right next door to each other. So, I
Yeah.
invited her to be here today because she has a really interesting path that actually goes both through a school and private practice. So to that end, Mariah, tell us, what do you do for work now?
So I own and operate Attunement Counseling and Assessment, and do kind of a variety of different things. So I do assessments for ADHD and learning disabilities, as well as like giftedness or just cognitive difficulties. And also do some counseling for mental health and a lot of ADHD related symptoms and difficulties that are related to education.
So not only do you have private counseling experience, school psychology assessment ability, but you're also a business owner.
Yes, yes,
You're
that was
kind
an
of
unexpected component of
not,
that.
not the path you expected, but you're like a
No.
Renaissance woman. Look at you. So how did you get to where you are now as owner of Attunement? What was the path?
It was a an interesting winding path. So when I went to college, I went to Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and I started out in journalism and quickly realized that that was not going to be my career path. So I think it was, first semester of college, I shifted to a psychology major and went through undergrad at Bowling Green. And for psychology, you really kind of have to go to graduate school to stay in that field. So I looked at a lot of different options and went to some presentations to talk about different career paths in psychology. And initially I thought I wanted to do clinical psychology, which is a pretty lengthy graduate school, oftentimes 6 to 7 years. Um, and I took the GRE, and I did not do well. So I'd always done well in high school and college, and it's just such a competitive field that I was like, what am I going to do now? So I had applied to social work programs as well. So that was kind of my plan B.
Mhm.
I enrolled at Ohio State for social work, and then again realized that that was not what I wanted to do. So I shifted to plan C and retook the GRE and came up with some other options and kind of found school psychology and applied to a few different programs and ended up at Ohio State for school psychology, which is a 3-year graduate program um, and including a 1-year internship at the end there. So then after that, worked in Columbus City Schools for 1 year, and then moved to Granville Schools where I was at for 7 years. And then, long path through that, but ended up leaving my job there and opening a private practice.
I had no idea. I've known you a really long time. I did not know that you had so many plans, but I think that's a
Yeah.
really important element to the story because in that you might have learned there are multiple paths to
Yes.
put your strengths and aptitudes into play. It's not, I think a lot of people think you get this degree, this job, and in
Mhm.
reality, there's lots of fields that can fit us.
Yes. Yes, for sure.
And I should say, for those who might not know what the GRE is, it stands for the Graduate Record Examination. And basically, sorry to burst the bubble of anyone who might want to go on to grad school that isn't the LSAT for lawyers or the MCAT for doctors. The GRE pretty much covers anyone else, any other field. And it's
Yeah.
basically like the ACT on steroids.
Yes.
Even some of the content like goes back to high school stuff. I also had to take
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Math and the vocabulary. Yeah.
I don't think I think I took a statistics course a couple different times, different levels of statistics in undergrad, but I hadn't taken like a calculus-based, algebra-based math course in college.
Mhm.
Placed out of it. So
Yeah.
doing a lot of review of sine, cosine, tangent.
Well, and during that time, they had changed the GRE. So there was like an old version and a new version.
Oh,
So
I
I
was in
took
the old version. Oh boy.
the old version and then had to study for the new version. So it was, yeah, it was even more complicated.
Oh, oh man. Ooh. So you studied at Ohio State for school psychology, 2 years of seat-based classroom work, 1 year of internship, which for those watching who are in high school, you've had student teachers. This is kind of the same idea, just probably shadowing and then actually doing assessments with a licensed school psychologist.
Yes, that's correct.
So in the school setting, what do you do? I mean, you talked about private practice assessments for ADHD, learning disabilities, et cetera. What does that look like in the school?
In the school, it's really all geared towards special education in that world. So we are the team chairperson for these evaluation reports. And so we would do a component for oftentimes IQ testing, academics, behavior and social emotional status. And we also help coordinate the team. So if there's other, a speech therapist or occupational therapist, we are in charge of sort of making sure everyone's invited. Everybody is kind of working together, and at the end of the report, we have to summarize and help kind of guide the team discussion on eligibility.
So I know you from our work at the high school level. When you get
Mhm.
a degree, a master's in school psychology, are you licensed K through 12? Or is there like how teachers are elementary education and middle childhood and then high school?
It's actually kind of like preschool to graduation from high school. So there is, in special education, some students do continue in high school until like the end of their 21st year. So really we could be working with anybody from 3 to 21.
So you are licensed for that huge range.
Yes.
But kids who are 3 aren't being assessed for learning disabilities or cognitive challenges or giftedness the same way a 21-year-old is.
Yes, very
What
different.
what do you have to know? Like, are there different tools, like different levels of tools?
Yeah, so there are different assessments, and a lot of things overlap or measure similar things, but there are assessments that are geared towards preschool age, or maybe geared towards 6 to 18, and then there's adult versions as well. So we do have to be trained in these tools, and just be able to practice each of them. And so that's part of grad school is kind of finding people to practice on. So sometimes it was cousins or friends, and we're practicing IQ tests at different age groups.
Oh, oh boy, that could probably make holiday dinners really interesting.
Yes.
You have the like secret file on everyone's IQ. Oh boy. So what are some of the things that in the school setting, because I do want to talk about private setting as well, but in a school-based practice, and we should mention Granville is a public high school. So in a public school setting, what were some of the things that were like huge pros about your role there? And then I also want to know the cons, and you can speak candidly.
Okay. So I worked at the high school and the intermediate school,
Oh,
which was
what grades are intermediate?
4, 5, and 6.
Okay.
So 4, 5, 6, and then 9 through 12. So gosh, the pros I think are just being part of that like built-in community of a school. So you have people around you that, hopefully you're working really well together. And just lots of different types of people. So I loved working with teachers and all the special ed staff as well as the counselors. So being part of that community. I think also the schedule of working at a school is a big pro, and something that drew me in because I knew that I wanted to have kids eventually, and maybe high schoolers aren't thinking that far ahead. But I knew, in college, I knew like eventually I want to have kids, so it was a pro, to be able to have summers off, and I wasn't working till 6 p.m. I was generally able to be home when my son got off the bus. um yeah, things like that.
Okay. Did you, if we now talk about cons, one of the things I'm wondering, and this is like a personal question I've always wondered about school psychologists, did you get into the field because you wanted to do more of the counseling piece? And then did you even get to do as much of that as you would have expected? Or was it more sitting with the student and I don't know, doing IQ testing type of things or cognitive testing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it does sometimes look different depending on the district. And another pro before I kind of
Yeah.
talk about cons, I really loved being able to be sort of proactive. So you're not maybe waiting for people to be referred to you in crisis, when you're in a school. So we can seek out kids that are at risk and work with teachers and counselors to identify those people before it becomes a crisis. So that's another wonderful thing about working in a school.
That is, yes, agreed, having done school-based work and then having a son with whom we have been in a really tough crisis point and needed psychological testing for him, and having to both coordinate with the school but also having the supports of like a private practice where we could get
Mhm.
in much more quickly. Um,
Yeah.
the school is great, but it's also kind of cool to have that private based support too. We'll get to
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
What about
But
cons in the school setting?
um, well, oh goodness. I think I'll say, in general, the paperwork. And I heard that going into the field that like the paperwork's going to be the hardest thing. And I think you don't really get it until you're doing it. So the evaluations are, and I like writing. I don't mind, sitting down and looking at my data and writing reports. But some of the paperwork that is required by the state is very redundant. And so I found myself kind of writing the same thing over and over again. Different, of course, depending on the student, but a lot of the same information being summarized. So it became a bit repetitive at times. And you asked about counseling.
Mhm.
Which is something that, yes, I thought I would be doing more of that in the school. We are trained in assessment, but also trained in mental health counseling, in graduate school. But unfortunately, a lot of school psychologists are kind of only seen as test and report right, test and report right. And because it's kind of been that way, that's what people sort of expect you to do. And when you do become really busy, it's hard to kind of craft out different ways to grow your career.
Yeah. Yeah. And to like flex that muscle, that part of you that's like the helper and not
Yeah.
let me do this test.
Well, and there are, I working with counselors, it was like, well, they probably are, they're doing this more often. So I'm gonna let them kind of do that piece of it, and I'll stick to what I'm expected to do.
Yeah. But, that's a little part of you that withers up, and
Yes.
not getting a chance to shine. I will say, I do think for anyone who's considering, different psychology based careers, that foundational piece that you brought to your work was that like instant ability to make people feel comfortable, because what you're about to do is put them through multiple different hours, maybe not all in one sitting, but
Hmm.
different times during their school schedule where you're like, hey, you're now going to do these random tests that you might not understand why.
Yeah.
Their buy-in. You need them to like trust you.
Yes.
Some kids can get really uncomfortable talking to adults, whether they know them or not. And so that like
Mhm.
that foundational piece of you, I think, is probably what makes you a natural helper. I've known enough helpers now where I'm like, that is the like
That's it.
that's the common denominator is
Yeah.
build rapport and put people at ease relatively quickly so that you can help accomplish whatever it needs to help them best. So
And that's sort of why I named my practice attunement was, I think to get kids to buy in, like you said, and give their best work, we have to be in tune with what they need. And so I did and still do try to let the kid lead and let the students lead. And if they need to take a break or stop and come back a different day, that's what we're going to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that that's a perfect segue for private practice. So what have you found, both conversely and similarly, are some of the benefits of private practice? So the pros and then the
Mhm.
cons.
Um, the pros, just being more in charge of my time. I said the schedule at school is a pro, and it is. But still, I think being able, if I'm hungry and I want to go out for lunch, I can do that without feeling guilty or without having to tell someone where I'm going, as a business owner. So the just being in charge of my schedule, being able to work where I can work best.
Yeah.
So I wasn't always, I do have ADHD, so I wasn't always able to sit and focus at my desk like I maybe should have. So being able to go to the library or go to a space that I know I'm going to be able to work is really a pro for me.
Yeah.
Um, so being in charge of my schedule, and then also just having the time to connect more with kids. So I've been able to spend more time getting to know kids through that counseling role, and not just being a test and report right. And so that's been really rewarding. Um, and then I would say also working with parents in a different way. So that's been something unexpected for me, but I've been able to collaborate more with parents in private practice than I was able to do at school.
Likewise, I
Yeah.
agree. That was an unexpected nice thing that I've had so much more of. I'm like, wow, I'm like on a team with the whole family, and it's not
Yeah.
seeing the student just during study hall, which I
Yeah.
also when you met with students. So
Yeah.
the school schedule can also be really restrictive in that way. You have to
Hmm.
budget when you can meet with those kids, where private practice, at least from where I've landed, it's like I set my hours and then you schedule based on the hours I've set.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
one other thing you mentioned that I wanted to just formalize is you're doing assessments for kids, and maybe sometimes it's just the assessment. Like, yes,
Hmm.
family has suspected that maybe you have ADHD. I'm doing the assessment. Here are my findings. And then the family maybe leaves your practice, takes those results back, and that's that. But in other cases, you're doing the assessment and then able to incorporate your findings into treatment.
Hmm. Yes.
No, that's great. And like really how it should be. I love that.
Yeah. So, and in the school, we are assessing and providing recommendations to intervention specialists, to teachers, to administrators, but not really able to carry those things out ourselves. So it is good to see that continued. I can recommend that we work on executive functioning skills, and I can help you do that.
Yes.
And so it is wonderful to kind of witness that growth.
Yeah, I bet. Like more than you would have expected, probably.
Yes.
And really missed out on doing on the school side.
Yeah.
Any cons on the private side of practice?
Um, I think just having to create a business is hard. And so, not necessarily a con, but a challenge is you're not, you can have a specialty, but you're also having to figure out just the, creating an LLC or thinking about retirement plans. And those aren't things that we really had to think much about working in a public school setting.
Right. Or marketing. Like that was something that I
Yeah,
hadn't.
marketing myself is definitely, getting people in the door.
Yes.
Um, not something that I had to do before. So that's been a challenge, but it's been fun kind of learning the ropes.
It's a new way for our brains to grow. Same, like, I joined a pre-established practice, but just the idea of marketing, I'm like, I've never had to do this. Like
Yeah,
school,
selling yourself.
like part of the school package. I don't know how to do this now.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. What did you have to do? Because when you came out of grad school as a school psychologist, that was what your licensure was for.
Hmm.
I do want to ask, was there an exam of some type that you had to take when you graduated with your master's? Did you graduate and like, now I can be a school psych, or did you have to pass some kind of licensing exam?
So our program at Ohio State was designed that you earn your master's. Gosh, I think it was after our first year of classes. So 1 year of classes, earned our master's degree, and then we actually earned what's called an educational specialist degree at the end of the third year. And we do have to take the school psychology praxis. So teachers have to take the praxis, but this is a different test just for school psychologists. And
Yeah.
you have to have a passing score on that and graduate from an accredited program. And then you can seek your licensure through the state of Ohio.
Yep. Very similar, identical pathway for school counseling as well.
Okay.
There's a praxis for school counselors. I don't know if it's still the praxis, actually. I haven't looked into it in
Oh,
a long,
yeah.
but then also licensure with the state. So it's not as though you came out of your master's program and you could practice privately. You had to make a
Right.
transition somewhere in there. What was that process?
So Ohio is kind of, it varies by state. Ohio is kind of unique in that once you have about 5 years of experience working in the schools, you can seek your independent licensure. And that is through the Ohio Board of Psychology. So I have two licenses currently, which is, one is through Ohio Department of Education and the other is through Ohio Board of Psychology. So I got my experience underway and then sought that independent licensure.
So I think we have arrived. I'm looking at my list here. I think we've arrived at my last question. And here it is. What personal characteristics and values would you say are essential for students who are considering a path in a school-based psychology field or even a private? I mean, you can speak to all of this, a
Mhm.
private practice psychology. What are the core characteristics and values, combo thereof, that
Yeah.
student would need to have to feel fulfilled and successful in this role?
I think strong interpersonal skills. So being able to be confident in, explaining your results and also confident in collecting information from teachers and parents and kids. You're working directly with lots of different types of people. So those interpersonal skills are key.
Yeah.
And then I think just kind of organization and being like a self starter. So a lot of times you're the only school psychologist in the building and you're handed kind of a list of cases that are due that year. And so you have to be able to break that task down and organize your time throughout the school year while you're getting new referrals as well. So being just planning, being able to plan your time well, keep track of all the paperwork and when things are due.
Yeah. A lot of moving parts with a lot of different due dates.
Yes. And yeah, we didn't really touch on the due dates, but Ohio and most states have timelines that you have to complete evaluations by a certain date, and that's really black and white. Like there's no wiggle room. So you have to get it done within that time frame. And so it's a big responsibility. So you have to be able to manage that sort of on your own at times.
Yeah. So independent ability to manage one's time, able to work under pressure of deadlines,
Hmm.
organization, interpersonal skills, and I mean, I think it's baked into interpersonal skills, but I want to call out what I mentioned at the beginning, like this heart of a helper, which I think is not often like highlighted or lifted up sometimes in talking
Hmm.
about different careers. And I think that's the thing that often brings a lot of people to the helping professions. Like that's really like at your core.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's why, a big reason why I went into the field is that I wanted to help kids and help them on their path to success. And a lot of times that's being creative and finding ways to help them grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. And before we sign off, I want to make sure that I share your contact info because you are starting out this business. I mean, I know you have clients and everything now, but a relatively new practice. So if you have questions for Mariah, here are her various points of contact, her address for her practice, her credentials. She's amazing, and I'm so lucky to have crossed paths with you just by happenstance in the world of Granville and have been your neighbor there.
Yeah.
Um, Office neighbor, but a neighbor. Um, and thank you. Thank you for sharing your time with us today and the path that got you here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Indeed. Same here. Thanks, everyone.